It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview Lauren Johnson, who is a mental performance coach on the sports level. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today, Brandon?
I'm doing good. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to get involved in sports on the professional level?
Oh, yeah. It started honestly when I was like 5 years old. I was put into soccer, rec soccer, I think like most people in the world, or at least where I grew up. And so I was put into sports and at a young age, fell completely in love with it. And it honestly just grew from there. So I ended up playing competitively all through high school and then played at the collegiate level. And it was actually my third game into my senior year. And I received my fifth concussion. And I was told it was no longer safe for me to play. And so here, my identity was being a soccer player to some degree. And so being told that I can no longer play the sport that I loved, it kind of stripped me of that. And so it caused me to really question, what is my future going to look like? Not that I was going to go play for the U.S. women's national team or anything like that, but I did have plans to potentially play overseas. And so that kind of got squashed pretty quickly. So I decided to take an elective course in sports psychology. I had never heard of it before. I was actually getting my degree in physical therapy at the time. And so I go and I start taking this course and I completely fell in love with it. It was almost as if the professor was kind of holding up a mirror and everything I was learning, it pertained to me. And so when people ask me, why did you want to get into the field of sport and performance psychology? The answer to that is because I was the athlete that needed it. I was the athlete and individual in person and young woman that needed performance in sports psychology. And so when I learned about that, I thought, what kind of player in person could I have been if I would have known this earlier? And then I thought, how many people can I impact now that I do? And so that led me down the path to figure out, how do I work in this field? And I ended up getting my master's degree in performance psychology. And from then on, I've been working in the field ever since.
That's so amazing. How did you know exactly when you wanted to, when you were in college?
So it was about it was my senior year, end of my senior year. So I had already, senior year is like the worst time to figure out you want to do something different. So I couldn't go back and, change my major. I guess I really didn't need to, thankfully. Kinesiology was my undergrad and I minored in psychology. So a lot of those classes actually were prerequisites for my master's degree. So it actually flowed pretty nicely.
How did you know that you wanted to work with professional sports and professional athletes?
I've always had an interest in athletics. Like I said, since I was about 5 years old, and I grew up in an athlete driven household. My dad was a really good athlete. My uncle played in the minor league system. My grandfather played baseball in college. So we just grew up with a lot of athletics. So I've always had an interest in it. And that's actually why I wanted to go into physical therapy. It's because I figured this is a way I can work with athletes and help them to come back from injury. So then once I realized, oh, wait a second, there's a whole nother field that I could do where I am just working solely with athletes, injured or not injured, and everything in between. And so that's what really brought me towards performance and sports psychology, because when I was in physical therapy, I really liked my relationship with my clients. I liked being able to talk them through their struggles during their injury. And I thought, what if there was a field where I could just do that? And then I found it. And so for me, it was a really easy transition from physical therapy to sports psychology because the athletic piece was the same.
Of course, coming out of college, what was it like working with college athletes in sports performance?
Yeah, it was a really great intro to it. So when I first graduated, I worked for my old college, Point Loma Nazarene University, and their soccer team. And it was a really great way to start applying some of the things that I learned. And man, I was so lucky because that team was just phenomenal. So, and they totally bought in, which is not always the easiest when it's something a team hasn't had before. So it was pretty incredible. And what I would do is I would go and I would do probably 30 to an hour sessions with them about every other week. And then I would show up to practice to support them and just be there for them when they need it.
What was it like transitioning from obviously the school that you grew up going to going to a different school like IMG?
Oh man, that was crazy. So I actually went to IMG Academy and I worked there while I was in my master's degree. So it was actually part of my master's degree. You have to do an internship, an applied internship. So I got awarded this internship and I lived in Florida at IMG Academy for 3 months. And I got to work under some of the best minds in mental performance. And IMG Academy, for anybody that doesn't know, is like an athlete's heaven. It's a boarding school, and their facilities are used by several professional teams. But essentially they had like 12 soccer fields at the time. They had like 6 baseball fields, and I'm sure that's expanded like crazy because that place was always growing. But it was great because I got a lot of different experience with several different sports. And I also got to see incredible people that have been in the field much longer than me. I got to see how they presented, how they worked with athletes. That's where I learned how to give a really good group presentation and how to do sessions.
What was it like going from, of course, IMG to the minor leagues?
Oof, now that was a whole different transition. And there was a lot that happened in between. So after I was at IMG, I finished up my master's degree. And when I graduated, I was offered 2 jobs. And I decided to take one and I turned down the other. The catch was the job that I did take was going to take 6 months for me to be placed, which was very normal for this job. So it wasn't a weird thing. And I said, great, I'm going to go ahead and take that. You know, for me, it was like another summer, like extended summer before the real world. So I take this job and 6 months goes by and I don't hear anything. And so I reach out and I said, hey, just checking to see when I should be expecting to get my placement. And that's when I receive an email back that says, we're sorry, the job is no longer available. So here I am. I go from having 2 job offers, being on cloud 9, like a grad student's dream, to having none. Because I couldn't call the other job. It's 6 months has passed. They've already filled the position. So I had to figure something out. I called everybody I knew in the field and I kept hearing the same thing. Lauren, you just need experience. You just need experience. And that's the most frustrating thing for any grad student to hear is you need experience. It's usually like 5 years and you're like, all right, well, I'm trying and I'm not getting experience. So I decided, you know what, I need to make money somehow. So I went and got a job at Starbucks. And it was one day when I was working the drive-thru that changed my entire life. So I'm working the drive-thru at Starbucks. And by the way, when you're working the drive-thru, it's your job to entertain the customer while their drink is being made. So I'm chatting it up with the customer and he goes, Lauren, so are you in school? And I said, no, actually, I just graduated. And he goes, great. What did you get your degree in? And I proudly told him performance psychology. And he just starts laughing, like full on belly laughing, to the point where I finally had to ask him. I said, excuse me, sir, but what's so funny? And he goes, oh, you got one of those degrees you'll never use. And my mouth just like dropped open. I was like, what the heck? Like, I couldn't even believe that he just said this to me. And I was so offended. I was so pissed off that I had to walk away. I couldn't even hand him his drink. And it got worse. Like I kept ruminating on this thing that he kept saying, that he said to me. And I kept replaying it over and over again in my head. And I would get more mad every time I did. And then I was mad because I was mad, because I'm like, Lauren, this guy doesn't matter. Like, why are you so upset? Like, why are you letting him have this much power over you? And that's when I had a light bulb moment. I wasn't mad because he was rude. I was mad because he was right. Here I am trying to work in a field that is all about teaching you how to be your best, regardless of circumstance, how to find another way. And here I am sitting here waiting for an opportunity to come to me. And I'll tell you right now, you're not going to get very far if you turn around at your first sign of adversity. And so that was the moment that I realized I needed to find another way. Just because I couldn't get experience the way I wanted it doesn't mean I couldn't get it. And so that was the day I Googled how to start your own consulting company. And I got my own I started my own consulting company and worked my butt off for a year, just cold calling, reaching out to people nonstop and building a resume. And after a year, I got an opportunity to interview with the Yankees and I got the job. And so that's how I started in the minor leagues.
That's so amazing. Of course, whenever you started your consulting and you got that job with the Yankees, what was that moment like when, after obviously what you've gone through, you knew like, oh my God, the Yankees just called me to get a job with them?
Oh my gosh, it was incredible. I mean, that feeling, especially after not getting a job I wanted so bad and calling everybody I knew and just continuing to be told, feeling like there was just roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. And anybody listening, you probably know what that's like. You probably know what that feels like when you just have all these obstacles in front of you. And so pushing through that, finding a new way and not giving up, because we know that half of success is sticking with something long enough to see results. And so I had to go all in on me and I had no idea what the outcome was going to be. And so to get that call, I remember actually when my associate director called me and told me I got the position, I actually said yes before he told me my salary. He was like, do you want to know what you're going to make? I'm like, oh yeah, probably. But it meant that much to me. And it felt absolutely incredible.
Of course, was that moment like when you said yes before you found out, of course, what your salary was? Was that because you knew how rich the Yankees history was and you were about to be a part of that?
I mean, that's part of it. I think, I have been a Yankees fan since I was a kid, which may be ironic because, you might think is weird because I grew up in California. But my grandfather actually grew up a huge Yankees fan, and he wouldn't teach me about baseball unless the Yankees were playing, because he said, you have to watch quality baseball. So that was his thing. And so he and I loved the Yankees. So yes, it didn't only mean a lot because I had kind of broken through, I kind of overcome this huge adversity of mine. But also because it was an organization like the Yankees, who I had so much and currently do have so much respect for, just an elite quality organization.
What was the transition like from traveling to where you were to go all the way to the Yankees?
Oh, yeah, that was a transition for sure. My husband and I actually moved to Tampa, where our player development facilities are. And so I would travel all the way up and down the East Coast to all of our teams throughout the season. And so we were located in Tampa for my first 2 years of working for them.
What was training camp like working with them in Tampa?
Oh, it's intense. Anybody who has been through spring training knows how intense spring training is. It is 8 weeks straight, not a day off. And we're talking, 10, 15-hour days. And it's intense. But I'll tell you what, there's nothing better than being in a room of every person in your organization and all working towards the same goal. And so for me, it was, spring training was equally exciting and exhausting and challenging all at the same time.
Of course, what has it been like running your big consulting business along with working with the Yankees?
So I didn't have a consulting business when I was with the Yankees. So essentially I had my consulting business, I joined the Yankees, and I kept a couple individual clients. But outside of that, I was 100% Yankees until the very, very end of my work with the Yankees. And I was also doing a little bit on the side, but I was always, Yankees was my full-time job, and any additional time I had, I could do a little bit, but really not that much because of how demanding our schedules were.
What is a typical game day like whenever you were working with the Yankees as a mental performance coordinator?
So it really depends on, I'll give you two. For me, it depended on if I was working with our rookie ball teams or if I was working with a full season team. So rookie ball, our first meetings may be it depended on the day, but sometimes 6:30 a.m., sometimes 7:30 a.m. And we're meeting with all the staff. We're kind of going over our schedules. And then we have breakfast with our incredible dietitians and their staff. And then they go out to the field around 8:10. And every once in a while, I'll go to my office. I'll start working on some items for them or for our staff. That's sometimes when either players that are injured, meaning they can't be out there or they're on assignment, they will come in and they'll chat with me a little bit, or that's when staff can come in. And then usually our sessions would be with them either before or after the games. And games usually started around 12 o'clock and we're out there for the full game. And so we are involved out there for the games. And then afterwards, that's where players may come in our office afterwards and talk about the game, how it went, or a check-in. And then when players go home, that's usually when staff will come and sit with us and we'll chat. And sometimes it's personal, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's about certain players. So that's a typical day in terms of rookie ball. And then if we're talking full season, it's that whole same day, except it doesn't start until noon. And so then meaning some days I wouldn't get back into my hotel or home until, I don't know, it could be 11 o'clock at night or even 1 o'clock, depending if there's a rain delay.
What was that like working the full season? And then obviously with COVID, how has COVID been a big part of course, your job as a mental performance coach?
Yeah. So, COVID definitely threw a wrench in everybody's plans, right? And at the very beginning, when that hit, it was totally different, right? Between being fully involved, being on the field, in the dugout, in all the meetings, to now it's either, now at least currently, and I'm not with the Yankees anymore, but from what I understand, now they only have certain people there because they have to keep numbers down in certain areas. But when COVID first hit, I remember I was actually out at a game and it was around 1 o'clock and my players came to me. They're like, Lauren, look, Mark Cuban shut down the Dallas Mavericks. Do you think we're next? And I was like, there's no way. There's no freaking way. And then 3 days later, Brian Cashman calls an all meeting outside and was like, hey guys, we're shutting down. And we all went into quarantine because we had a couple cases in our building. And so we all had to quarantine. And what that looked like in terms of mental performance is when we all went home, the most important thing at the very beginning was checking in on everybody's mental health and seeing how everybody's doing. And so that's what we did. We would check in frequently. We'd see how they're doing. Hey, how can we still, how are you doing? How's your family doing? Because some families were not in good positions. And so then there was a time when we transitioned from, hey, how are you? To, hey, look, there's several teams out there that are using this as an excuse not to work, not to continue to improve. And I said that, we know what that means? We have an advantage to improve and to work while we wait, because you may not have the opportunity you want, but you always have the opportunity to improve yourself today. And so that's when we went into beast mode, and we're like, all right, what can we do? We got creative and we started getting to work, and it was awesome. The players at the Yankees are incredibly resilient.
What was the transition like whenever you came back from, of course, COVID and transitioning back into that real world of before COVID?
So I didn't. So I would be the wrong person to ask that, because COVID was still going on when my contract ended and I decided not to resign and go off on my own. And so this past February, I decided to open my own company and go off on my own and do my own consulting business again. So the craziest thing, and I talked about it with some of my coworkers and my directors, that it was crazy that the day we left, I had no idea that would have been the last time I walked in that office. And so I never went back because they weren't even open by the time my contract had ended.
What was that transition like from going from, of course, the Yankees to back to your own business as a consultant?
Yeah, so it was, it was incredible. We'll start there. Better than I thought it would be. There was certainly a part of me that was fearful, that was scared. There was no guaranteed paycheck. There was no, guaranteed health benefits. So that was all on me. And so it was definitely one of those leaps of faith where I knew I wanted to do more. And it was hard to also leave a job that I loved so much. And so I was very lucky to get the support of the Yankees in this transition. And it was they made it just a wonderful transition for me. But I do have to say that it was really scary, going from working with such an amazing team and having the support around you to being on your own, no matter what, that's always going to be a transition. But I have to say it's been phenomenal. I've been able to work with so many incredible individuals and organizations that I'm really thankful for it.
Of course, when you were working on your own, were you still working with some of the MLB teams, or were you going more back to your past of working with college teams?
So I'm actually working more with business now. So I'm not working as much with sports, although I do have sports clients. I have a couple individual clients. And then I do work with a couple teams, more college teams. The thing with MLB teams is they really want full-time people. And although I would be open to that, I would have to be a very specific contract. So for me right now, where I've been really devoting a lot of my time and where a lot of my clients are coming from are the business world. So I'm working just with C-suite executives and all of their teams to help them develop mental performance and mental skills so that they can perform their best regardless of circumstance.
Of course, with that, what was the transition like from going from sports all of your career to going towards the corporate world of transitioning from sports to the corporate world?
Honestly, I thought it was going to be a lot. Like I thought it was going to be totally different. And it really wasn't. It was the same way. I felt the same way when I went from working with like a baseball player to a Muay Thai fighter. The principles of mental performance and our neurology and our biology, that stuff stays pretty the same. Now, it doesn't mean we don't learn new things and we don't evolve in our science, but for the most part, there are perennial principles that remain the same. What changes is the language. No longer am I talking, fastballs and curveballs and, home runs. I'm talking leg kicks, and I'm talking, different kinds of holds and punches, like that. Just the language changes. So same with business. It went from talking sport to talking corporate language and business language. And so thankfully, to be honest with you, the other cool piece is that in business, to me, they're just corporate athletes. And a lot of them relate to sports analogies. So that actually made my transition super easy because talking sports with most of them was just like right up their alley.
Of course, during your time of working with sports, were you only working with like baseball, or were you doing a little bit with football and basketball and other sports like boxing, wrestling, that kind of stuff? Or were you strictly like baseball is the only thing I was doing?
No, yeah. So great question. I worked with all sports. It wasn't just baseball. Obviously, when I was with the Yankees, it was very heavily baseball. But no, I've worked with swimmers, ice skaters, golfers, Muay Thai fighters, wrestlers, soccer players, tennis. I mean, you name it, I've probably been close to working with it or something similar. So I think that's the cool thing is that our field becomes it's very dynamic, because it's not just for sports. That's why my degree is called performance psychology. It's a broader term instead of just calling it sports psychology. So I was not only taught how to apply it to sports, but I was also taught how to apply it to actors and actresses, high-risk occupations like firefighters, military, policemen and women, and like the arts like Broadway. So it wasn't just sports. And I've worked with pretty much a wide range, including professional dancers and many others.
What are some of your future plans as you still start to build more on your business?
Oh man, Brandon, there's a lot. There's a lot. And I can't share all of it with you today. Don't worry. I'll have to come back on and share when I can. But I do have to tell you that I have some big things coming up. I'm going to be hosting my first event in November, and details will be coming out soon, but it's for anybody interested in the world of sports psychology. So that's somebody who's thinking about going to grad school, grad students, people that are new to the field, and really bringing together who I think are some of the best minds in mental performance to help teach you not only how to thrive, network, and get hired by an elite organization, but then also how to build your own business and your own personal brand surrounding it. And then also how to do the work. Sometimes we're not taught that. We're taught the science, but then how do we apply the science? And so that's something that that I'm going to be teaching in this live event in November. Like I said, there will be more to come on that. But outside of that, I am also, working on some online courses and some other things like that will be more accessible to people.
What, of course, does your services offer?
So my main services, so number one is I do one-on-one coaching. And, these are people that really are they're fully committed. And I only have one offering when it comes to my online coaching. And the reason why is because I need you to be all in. I've done, just half in, half out kind of clients, and it just doesn't work. And so I have a very, very high standard for who I bring on as clients, and I keep it really small because I want people that are going to be willing to do the work. So number one, I do one-on-one coaching. Number two is I do speaking services. I do keynotes. I do group trainings, all that sorts of stuff. And yes, those are my two main things that I do currently for all of my clients. And then I also have an a la carte menu, but typically people who engage in speaking, they also do some add-ons.
What advice would you give somebody looking to work in sports on the mental performance side?
Some advice. Okay, that's a great question, Brennan. Number one, do good work. I know that sounds super simple, but sometimes when we enter into this field, and I know this because I felt this, is that sometimes we feel like, oh, we need to be paid right away. But you know how much stuff I did for free to start? And so number one is just no matter what you choose to do, whether you get paid or you don't get paid, do good work. Okay, really take time to put your heart into it. Not just what the science is, but just a little bit of everything. And don't be afraid to lean on somebody in the field. There's so many people I've looked over their presentations for them, but be on time, be accountable, show up, do the things you say you're going to do, because when you do good work, people want to work with you. And so it creates kind of this spiral of networking through that. I'd say another thing is put in the reps. Again, a lot of times we come out the gate and we're like, well, we want to charge this much, and that's all great, but it takes a while to charge a lot. You need that experience. And it's not that anybody doesn't have the ability to do it, but when you put in the reps and you gain that experience, then you can back up that price. And so rinse and repeat. I know for me, when I was not getting the experience I needed, I offered to do so many things for free, and go do it and then rinse and repeat, and ask yourself the right questions when you evaluate, like, how did it go? And ask the client to give you feedback. And I would get some feedback where they're like, well, it was okay here. You could have worked on this here. You could have brought a little bit more energy. And every piece of feedback I got improved my next rep. And so I started off, and every rep after that got more or increased in terms of quality. Third piece of advice has to do with networking. Networking is so important in sport and performance psychology, especially if you want to work for an organization. And so one of the things that I did is I reached out to everybody that I knew in the field and just started networking with them and asked to get on the phone with them. And I would ask people about their stories. And when you do that, you end up learning so much about them. And that's not where it ends, though. My piece of advice is not only to reach out and get on the phone with some people, but my second piece and more important piece is that when you do, make sure you follow up every 4 to 6 months. And so I actually put an alarm in my phone that said, hey, email, and I had a list of emails to reach out to. And what I did was I wouldn't only just reach out to them and say, hey, how are you? I would reference things that we talked about. Like, oh, hey, I remember your daughter's birthday was coming up. How was it? And I would also then let them know where I was at. Yeah, so recently I just started working with this baseball team. It's the pros have been this, some of the challenges have been this. Anyway, I just wanted to see how you're doing. What that does is it keeps you top of mind, and you end up building a relationship, because when you only call on people when you need them, it feels like you're just taking. And so my question would be, how can you also give? to somebody else, even if they're somebody that has a lot more experience than you. And sometimes even just checking in to see how they're doing can create that bond in that relationship.
That's wonderful advice. Where can my listeners find you at on social media along with your business at?
Yeah, so on social media, you can find, I'm on 3 main platforms. Let's see here, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And the way to be connected to all 3 of those places, the easiest way is to actually go to my website, which is laurenjohnsonandco.com. So that's Lauren Johnson, ANDCO.com. And because all my handles are different, if you just go to my website, it'll be the easiest place to find each and every one of them.
Thank you again, Lauren Johnson, for your interview. Best of luck in your future, wherever it may hold you in your rest of your business.
Thanks so much, Brandon.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at @talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Lauren Johnson, for your interview, and best of luck in your future.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.